So, Serena, I want to thank you so much for coming on my YouTube channel. I had a pleasure of going through your facilitator training some months ago, and it was really amazing. Like the sheer amount of content and the concepts and the information and the like everything, the way you do it, it's so like I've never seen somebody so easily like just make the learning process so easily accessible. It's really amazing the way you do it. So I would really recommend the training to anybody who's interested in following it. The innerdancetrust.com, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for being here today. Like I've done inner dance session afterwards, and it's only recently that I like got the idea like, hey, I want to actually like have interviews with all of my teachers, all the people who I've studied with and who have like a certain kind of expertise. And of course, you were one of the first persons I thought of because like, whoa. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. Um, I would like to ask you, like, can you maybe please share your journey a little bit?
Yeah. How far back do you want me to go when it comes to sharing my journey?
Like, because we're talking about spirituality and life, like how were you before you got into spirituality? When did you start with spirituality, and
Mm.
why do you now do what you do?
Okay. This has been a part of my life since before I was born. Let me just start with that. I don't know that I've ever felt separation from spirit, at least not in a way that made it feel new when finding more of it. Um, and I was a person in my childhood and teenage years whom others really thought was a spiritual person, even before I understood what that might mean. um, I did. I was raised in a very Christian household growing up, so there was always this form of spirituality in religion. Um, but I also started off at 5 years old going to an evangelistical service where Holy Spirit energy was really powerful and a lot of healings and miracles happened. It wasn't so large scale that it was a mega church doing everything on television where things were made up in order for TV to look good. These were things that were actually really happening for people. So, my understanding of healing, miracles, um, this capacity for something to change very, very rapidly and be real was never something I didn't believe in. I always believed in it because I was witnessing these things from a young age. So I also thought that if this was what happened when I went to a service or to church, that it could happen anytime, anywhere. And it was always moving through. Um, and that's because at 5, when I went to this first evangelistical service, I had no idea what Jesus meant as a person or as a figure or a symbol within the religion for the context of the religion. I just felt the energy and it was so powerful. It was just pure vibration and love, and that completely it flooded my entire system. And I remember it so clearly, and for days having this high afterwards and just feeling so alive from this shift in the vibration and the power of it. So I think that stuck with me. And even after I stopped going to church and just became more independent and curious about things for myself, that feeling, that very, very tangible, embodied feeling of an energy that was representing spirit, God, Holy Spirit, source, light, and everything that has the capacity to move us was at the root of everything. So, from way before inner dance, my journey was in relating to this feeling of spirit and its capacity to move energy through us, with us, and in our lives, and how to incorporate that within greater understandings around consciousness. So that's something I also started to talk about even in my teen years and definitely in my university years. So when I was in university, a lot of conversations would eventually in like late night talks um, after a party or something turn into a very philosophical dialogue on connections between science and spirituality, and noticing just how immersed people became within the feeling and the texture of what we were speaking about rather than just having a conversation. There was this dialogic emergence that was already happening. So when it came to understanding that in a very experiential way, I had a strong foundation in it that also helped a lot when moving into the bigger context of working with a group of people before an Innerdance session or in a training process or an energy school.
Hmm. Wow. I wanted to ask you, like, how would you define consciousness? What is consciousness?
In a very basic, more simplified scientific way of looking at it, I consider it like the third brain. If we have brain as the physiological part, mind more as the psychological part, consciousness is this bridge between the embodied aspect and the spirit part. What is it that we are even after we leave the body or before we enter the body? What is it that is a part of all living consciousness that then has to be a part of what we are because we're alive? And in what way does that move beyond just our own species and planet? Um, and in what way is it like the consciousness of one planet is just a small synoptic connection in relation to a universe's brain, and the consciousness of a universe that is also a part of how we get to live, how we get to be alive. Um, so this for me is that type of seed that extends beyond our own bodies, thoughts, or um, conceptual understandings of life and the world, and uh, makes us a part of a much older story.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you have like an idea or an intuition what like the purpose of our earthly life here is or could be?
What the purpose of our early life, you said?
Earthly,
Earthly.
like
Ah.
here, yeah,
What is the purpose of our earthly life?
or could be.
Um, um, this is a funny one. The first thing that comes to mind is have a good time. I don't mean that in terms of all of the 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 earthly temptations that we might consider when we think of having a good time. But if, let's say, um, Earth really is a very unique place in all the universe. Not saying it's the only unique place, but it's one of a few really cool, interesting, unique experiences that when you get into the gravitational pull of this world and you end up stuck to it as a human because you're in a body and a form that organically connects to what life looks like on Earth.
Mm,
Um, it's it's such a fast moment in relation to what's so much bigger. Have a good time. Yeah, experience it. What is it that won't get to be remembered in quite the same way once the body is gone? um, every favorite food that you've ever tasted, you only get to know how good that feels because you have a mouth and you have taste buds. And if you didn't have that, what would that feel like? Yeah. It wouldn't have the same sort of rush, but there might still be a memory. Like there's this sense that used to be considered taste, and I don't have that anymore. But the feeling of this intentionality to put something towards your mouth and bite in and allow that to fill and flood the rest of the sensory world. There's something very beautifully intoxicating about that. Um, we're filling ourselves up with memories, and we're remembering the more that we're here, the things that we forgot when the entry into the body, as it starts to feel what that's like outside of a womb, outside of that watery, safe container, um, is 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 this journey back home. Um, and maybe it doesn't feel like that for everybody, but in relation to like, how do you have a good time? How do you how do you find the balance between what is the survival or the suffering and what is the thriving and the joy? Mm.
Thank you. Can you maybe share how you first found Innerdance or how it found you?
Mm. I was going to a Kundalini yoga class in Malaysia, and the facilitator for this class had gone to the Philippines and worked with Pi, and um, also worked with him when he had come to Malaysia. There weren't so many people in Malaysia back in 2012 that had been doing Innerdance. I just happened to live walking distance from this yoga studio where this Kundalini yoga teacher was holding a session, one session a week. He did sessions at other places too, so this was convenient. It was it was after the second class that I went to, um, and my body was just kind of shaking a lot during the session, and I was very aware of how much vibration and like very physical vibration was moving through me during the class. So afterwards, he had asked um, if energy had always been that strong in my system, or if it was something that happened only after I was struck by lightning. Um, so that kind of got the conversation started, and no, I let him know, no, it's been like this. Lightning strikes were just a part of maybe this greater dynamic that's been there. And so he said, that's interesting. There's this thing called Innerdance. It's kind of like an energy playtime. And would you be interested? Uh, I I I didn't care much for the name. It didn't, mean much. But the idea of energy playtime was very intriguing. So yes, I love to play with energy. Whatever this is, if it's an energy playtime, sure, let's go play. He's like, okay, I'm gonna be organizing a session sometime soon. A friend of mine is coming back from China, and she feels ready to facilitate. So this other Kundalini yoga teacher had also been in the Philippines and working with Pi. And so the two of them felt ready to hold some sessions, and they wanted to try it out. So it was really soon after that that he invited a few people over to his house, and it was just a small group of us, maybe three or four, and there wasn't much spoken because this was their first time exploring what it was going to be like. So it was like, all right, just go ahead and lay down, and then they put some music on, and um, yeah, it was very unexpected uh, and familiar at the same time. um, Not having any instructions, really just gave me permission to be in myself wherever I was at, and to just feel whatever was going to come up without any instructions or intentions or um, modes of practicing. Yeah, there was none of
Mhm.
that. And then my first inner dance session was exactly 1 year after I had been struck by lightning, and that I didn't put the pieces together until afterwards, but that was pretty significant. Um, and my first inner dance experience did feel a lot like the surges of electricity when the body goes into very, very heightened vibrational states, but in a physical way at a cellular level. And um,
Mm.
that happens a lot in breath work. But I had actually noticed that as I had slowed down my breathing and let it get deeper and deeper, the sensation was increasing rather than subsiding. So it wasn't because of in um, like inducing this state through breathing or something else. It
Mhm.
just was coming up very strong. So yeah, I was able to sit with it, but it was also extremely uncomfortable. And there was no reference for what that was or why. And afterwards, I had thought, wow, if this is what everyone's experiencing, my goodness, this work is really intense. And it took a while before I realized, oh, this isn't what everyone else's experience is like. So now what, how do I how do I internalize or integrate what this was for me when it also doesn't show up the same way for everyone else?
Mm.
What am
Mm.
I tapping
Mm.
into then?
Mm.
Is it because of this work? Is it because of me? Is this just another piece in the puzzle that I was also, destined, intended to find in some way? Because this energy was also already there. So it's just like aligning back with a piece of yourself, especially if you move to the other side of the world and start living in Asia and you don't really know why. And I
Yeah.
had only been in Asia for less than a year at that point when I was
Wow.
first introduced to the inner dance. Mm.
Mm. So, why did you choose to invest time into it and stick with it?
I was quite excited by how strongly I was able to tap into that electricity that
Mm.
after the lightning strike was maybe just um like sitting in residues or
Mm.
building up in some way in my system and didn't have space to release. Like there wasn't as much of a practice for releasing that energy.
Mm.
So it was just kind of there, and it was very intense because I also landed in Malaysia at the start of monsoon season. So the the amount of lightning and thunderstorms in Kuala Lumpur at that time of the year was very intense. So my system was just getting overloaded with electricity. I found this as like an outlet for that at first. And then I noticed how most of what I was experiencing in the process was very similar to what I had allowed myself to explore, journey into, um, realize in very personal moments for myself for years and years and years. It was as though things were just kind of sinking into place. Like, I know what this is. I've been doing this for so long. I
Mm.
only just remembering. But over here in Asia, there's a name for it.
Mm.
In the US, like nobody was familiar with it or
Mm.
anything in connection to community, at least not where I lived, in regard to spirituality of the same type of nature that I was exploring or experiencing, communities of spirit outside of religion. And it's it's changing, or there are some towns or places where you go and yeah, people are
Yeah.
really knowledgeable of this. Um, but I found that in Asia, there was a different way of interpreting what was moving through people. So I was
Yeah.
really appreciative of that, and the feeling of having a community, um, others that might understand things similarly to me, or that I might be able to talk about openly and honestly in relation to topics that I just never had a chance to really dive deep into with people when I lived in
Mm,
America.
mm. Why is it that some people are like super sensitive and they have like these real intense experiences and others don't?
Mm. Uh, One thing, the inner dance works in waves. So it's very possible that someone lays down and has an experience in their first session and it's super profound, let's say.
Mm,
And because it is so profound, there is now an expectation that every session thereafter is also going to have the same intensity as the first one, or that if it opened something so much in that one session, how far is it going to go in the next one? And so it
yeah.
almost sets things up for the energy to do a lot less or to seem much softer, because the expectation is there for it to be just as mystical and magical or
Mm,
enchanting as the very first time. And
mm,
I think that holds a lot of people in their own containers of what needs to actually come through rather than what you want to have come through, so that you get what you need in order to also find the balance, but not always what you want. I think other times it's actually quite different when someone goes deep and someone else doesn't. um, Maybe it actually takes time to understand what trust is, or to allow oneself to become vulnerable, or
yeah.
to drop the um, mind chatter, especially around, am I doing this right? Did I do that wrong? How do I do this better? I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. And a lot of these mind questions can also kind of block us from fully surrendering to a moment, so that we experience the moment in simplicity and wholeness.
Mm,
If that is a part that we're actually working on, we
mm,
would probably get there at some point, but it might not be today's session and it might not be tomorrow. So it might just take some
mm,
time. And then in general, the energy does work in waves. So even if there isn't this expectation that it's going to be the most profound experience you've ever had every single time, um, you might have a lot of profound moments, but then you also need the soft ones. You also need what is subtle, what seems to be almost nothing, in order to
mm.
see, is there something really great, deep, explosive inside the nothing? And if you only ever experienced it as something, could you truly appreciate what feels like nothing? So
Yeah.
sometimes that comes into balance too.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Can you maybe like people who don't know what inner dance is, what is inner dance and what happens in a session?
Mm. Um, there are a lot of different ways to describe inner dance. Uh, and it really depends on like the context for how I'm describing it as to what words or languaging I might use. Something as simple as it's a music-based meditation, or some type of an immersive sound journey is a really basic way to share with people that don't really know much. For those that might already understand things about music, I might speak more about the soundscapes having a direct correlation to brainwave states, and a movement through different brainwave states to activate the circadian rhythms and allow for this waking dream like quality to come through. So sometimes we might describe inner dance as a wakeful dream state. And that's another really basic way to say what it is. And in a more elaborate way, I might speak of it as a connection to source energy and expanded states of consciousness that come from within and act as a catalyst for the remembrance of all that we are, all that we've come from, and everything that exists as a movement in life. Um, and that being wherever it is that you're at in the moment, and how that changes, more like a river of experience than something specific or solid that you can go back to every single time you enter the practice. So another thing I might say is Innerdance is different every time. And that's like an easy way to describe it, but not in describing it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So is it all about the music and the dream state though? Or is there like behind the scenes in the energetic and the unseen, let's say, what we don't see? Did, like, is there something happening there? Are there like certain dynamics unfolding that we don't necessarily have awareness of?
Mm. Uh, there is always an energy in motion at work, um, in an interplay between us and ourselves, each other, the room, the greater collective conscious energy of all those present, and the co-creative quality of immersing in something together that actually allows for this experience to unfold. If we were always doing this alone by ourselves, it would have a very different quality than what we know it to be when we do come into larger group spaces with a lot of people all at once. The music is there to help hold groups in particular. It's also there as a way to help facilitators feel more confident about the movement of energy, because it's not always as easy to feel it in these flow states inside of ourselves. A lot of times we remember what we're feeling when something external reminds us of what we're feeling. So as the music is moving through different brainwave states or different styles of music or emotional triggers, those things come up in us as well. So the music helps to support a lot of the psychological aspects of sound in connection to our humanness, as well as rhythms and tones and vibrations that our body is aware of in a way of listening that extends far beyond our ears. So our whole body is coming into this deep state of listening, and music is helping ferry us through this journey of what are you listening to. That listening doesn't need music in order to be heard, but because a lot of us listen specifically with our ears, it's harder for us to hear what we're listening to in our whole bodies. And I think the music really gives us that space to feel like the depth of listening is supported. So the energy, though, that is being listened to, whether there's music or not, is always it's always there. Um, this is an organic part of what makes life possible. It's like speaking with the source energy of life itself. What moved in order for us to be alive? Yeah. And in order for anything to grow, there has to be movement. A cell divides, another one joins, something, becomes more refined and turns into a heart or a liver or a brain. And it starts off with just a few cells. These are movements, and they're movements towards life and growth. So anytime you see a tree growing or a flower blooming, this is also a type of movement. And this is what we know inside of ourselves as an energy that moves us to grow, to change, to transform. And that is a source. It's a source of potentiality, and a very deep surrender to allowing what moves us to be this gentle force rather than one we try to control or to um, compare to anything else. Um, it's the source of what drives us, but it's not a thing that drives us. So when we stop being driven by things, a lot of times we return back to the source of whatever that energy is. And I feel like this is where inner dance um, helps us enter more of this state of remembrance. And then the more that we allow ourselves to be within that state, the more the potentiality seems to unfold.
So can somebody have like an inner dance session without music as well?
Yes.
Huh. How?
This is you yourself remember these vibrations or these waves between what is slow and what is fast, and how things can move both slow and fast simultaneously, where in you there is this movement. And I don't always mean physical as in like something in the body moving. This is also just energetic or something you can feel inside of you. Like, for example, if you're nervous and you feel butterflies in your stomach, that's a lot of movement in the feeling of your belly, right? Or you meet somebody for the first time and you are mesmerized or just like in awe of this person, and then your heartbeat starts to race, and so that's a movement, and you're like, wow. Wow, my heart is just beating so fast, and now I can feel that, and I'm just feeling very immersed in this feeling or this rush of energy. um, we know what it's like when we get angry or upset and our blood temperature rises, and things start to tense up because we're just full of something that we need to either express or release or move in some way. And so we're always doing it. We are always doing this. And most of the time, it's happening without music. This is a way of letting us look at what we often try to control, but to allow for it to be more in a chaos and an order simultaneously. There's an organization to chaos, but that comes not from trying to organize chaos ourselves, but from allowing the unknowns of what is chaotic to become more chaotic. And so it creates more of a natural order through the chaos. And in that way, whenever we internalize and allow ourselves to feel in a subtle way or a very expressive way, um, you don't need the music to feel the movement. Yeah. Music helps us feel the movement, but you don't need it to feel the movement. That's always there, anyways.
Wow. Thank you. So beautiful. Can you maybe talk about the role of the facilitator and surrender?
It's the role of the facilitator to surrender. um, uh, yeah, no, that's a very basic answer. Um, a lot of times I will tell people that although we come into the space with this title or role as facilitator, you are every bit as much a participant of this as anyone who's laying down. The one difference is you might be the only person in the room with your eyes open. Or you might, have co-facilitators and you're walking around the room together. So there's a difference between what you're observing because your eyes are also visibly paying attention in some way or another. But the experience happens when we all surrender to the allowance of the expression of the energy in motion at that time. And that's not something I can plan. I can't prepare in terms of like getting everything right. Most of the time, the more a facilitator creates directionality on what they are facilitating, the more things break down to create the chaos again, to help us help remind us that we're not in control of this. Yeah. It doesn't mean that we need to feel out of control, but that's the surrender. Yeah. So to facilitate, we need to surrender to the allowance of what is in motion, which means we need to be able to facilitate ourselves to take a step back from our person and the intention to be doing something and allow the experience to happen for us.
Hmm. So it's not like the facilitator is some kind of healer or something like that.
I think a lot of facilitators would also consider themselves healers. And I think that's fair in the limited languaging that we have to describe what we're doing in a space. To even say facilitator is, it feels very limiting as a word that could describe what we actually are doing
Mm,
when we're
mm,
together. So
yeah.
for people that consider themselves healers, it's also because a lot of healing does happen. But I am more specific about disengaging from the languaging of being a healer to also minimize how much pressure we put on ourselves to be within the role and the expectations of being a healer. I also feel like when a facilitator comes into a space in the role of a healer, they feel that they have to be doing the healing, right? And there's a lot of pressure then to be the one doing something. How can you fully let yourself experience it if you're constantly in a state of doing? There's now a directionality, and a lot of times energy will move in the direction that your intention is set. So if you're set on healing someone, they might receive it, but they might have received it whether you were in that intention or not. So one thing that happens is uh the possibility for burnout or for feeling very, very drained at the end of a session if the facilitator holds this role tightly as what they need to be in order for things to work. Because in actuality, it would probably work even without that feeling you have to be in this role. And if you actually took the pressure off of being in the role, you would probably feel a lot better afterwards or be able to sustain this longer. It's when we isolate ourselves as the one who's doing all the work by saying
Mhm.
that this role as the healer is the one that's healing. No, it's that person themselves. They're the one healing themselves. You are the
Yeah.
observer of what is being catalyzed within them. Yes, that's important. The role of the observer is very important, but it's a lot harder to then market a class or a session by saying, I'm the
Mm,
observer and you're all participating. It's a lot easier to help people understand if you say that you're facilitating, right? So I
yeah.
think this is an issue to do with languaging, but as well the internal intentions. Why do we show up for a session? Why do we hold space? Why have we chosen
Mm,
to work with other people in this way?
yeah, beautiful. So for very practical people who always want to get something out of something, like what would you say or what do you think like people can get out of inner dance in a very practical way?
Um, I've started playing with your words in my head, and I'm just trying to see if it actually makes sense to say it. Part of it feels like when you come to a session, it was, for those that want to get something out of something, um,
Mm,
maybe this is more like getting something out of nothing, or
mm,
getting nothing out of something. And if you were to get absolutely nothing out of something, could that feel more pleasurable, enjoyable, or real than if you were expecting to get something out of something? Like the
mm,
less that you try to get, the more you actually receive.
mm,
If you keep trying to get something, there's only very little that can come back and be given. Yeah. So the less that you
Mm.
try to get it, the more you tend to just receive it. It's that openness and trust and that allowance towards surrendering into a possibility
Yeah.
rather than a destination.
Mm. Is it then like with every session that there's a sort of inner alignment that's occurring for people? I don't want to say that they get like an upgrade or there's like a next step in the evolution of their consciousness or the integration of their being, but like something like that.
uh, in a very direct way that I've also looked at in different studies that I've done when I've been able to connect people after an inner dance session and prior to the session in
Mm,
like a biofeedback or electromagnetic reading, that shows there is often a strong shift in the internal vibrational state that matches greater um, greater input from either spiritual energy or from uh, an energy that does seem like it's kind of coming this way. Yeah. And maybe in a meditation we might, speak about that as connecting with light, connecting with source, aligning with your highest consciousness or higher self.
mm,
These would be ways of understanding in language, like what is this energy space, yeah, and
mhm,
what's moving
mhm,
through. So that is a part of this because it's natural for this, all right. And when when we come into the intention of also witnessing ourselves in a moment, if this moment is unfolding and we're simultaneously experiencing that unfolding, a lot of times these higher types of energy will open up naturally.
mm,
So that is like a basic part of the work. um um I don't know if I would say that in every session every participant feels like things are lining up. I feel like
mm,
sometimes we become very aware of a pattern or a trauma, something that we might label as stuck. And it might give things space to open up, whether that be in feeling full on an emotion that's connected to that memory. Maybe it's actually physically being remembered. We can
mm.
feel tensions or pain or even something very beautiful and expansive in our physical body. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is there to give us a sense of hope or trust or just this glimpse of an expression of the universe in a moment when everything exists as this expression and it's so beyond a human experience. How do we bring what it feels like to be in this moment back to our humanness when we come back through? And that doesn't mean that anything's necessarily getting realigned, but perhaps it's giving us just what we needed in relation to trusting something more so that it's easier to be inside the human experience that doesn't always
Mm,
seem to be so alive. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. I must say, like when you start speaking, it's so easy to like just go into it and drown into it. It's amazing. Um, there's a term that you use in one of your classes, like bird vision or bird plan. Can you
Mm.
say something about that?
Birth vision. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a part of inner dance um, since yeah, before I've been a part of it.
Mm,
But definitely a a thought, a question, an expression that is rooted in a returning to the remembrance. And birth vision is talked about in various philosophies and theories and histories and mythologies from around the world. It is related to that understanding of consciousness before you have a body, before you have a name, before you experience your actual physical birth. What in your spirit, in your essence, in the vibration of who you are, even before you had a name, is also in some way guiding or driving or acting as a motivational force for your life. And maybe we start to look at this in our own life through astrology or numerology. Things like human design are now used to understand, like, how are all of these potential charges organized in our own system.
mm,
And so in what way before you were born was all of this energy organized before it had to like get situated into the nuances of how it would play out? Yeah.
mm,
In what way before there was ever a trauma was the innocence of you in an expression of divine love also feeling what that might look like on a planet, in a body, in relation to an experience that we call
mm,
human life. And
mm,
can we fulfill that? Can we remember it? Can we remember this? Yeah, this purity, this divine element in our lives, or have we forgotten it? Yeah. And I think traumatic birth can quickly make us forget birth visions. Um, Challenges in childhood can make it hard to feel the innocence of being small and being in a very pure state when love is, it's not just tangible, it's like it's everything until somehow life takes it away more and more.
mm, mm, mm,
So when we connect back, especially to this feeling of pure love, um, that's so much greater than just what is human love. And
mm,
I think that also helps us to remember what this birth vision energetically might be like. So even if we can't feel as though everything we do in our life meets what the vision was, um, at least it's like there's a memory of what we'll return to once this is over.
mm. Do you think like that everybody or only certain people can like embody that light fully and almost be like angelic beings in human form?
um I'm just gonna share a quick story rather than
Yeah.
answering this.
Okay.
There's a story about an old man living in the East in Asia, and he's a rice farmer, and he every day tends to the rice fields, and his whole life he is tending to the rice fields. And every harvest there's something to feel good about because rice is such a important part of daily life and every meal, and how many people survive on the sustenance that rice gives. It's so important in relation to human survival. And so there's more than just tending to the fields every day that
Mm,
this man goes to, you know, work work with the plants. Yeah. And one day, as the man's getting older, he thinks to himself, wow, this is all that I do, but why am I here? Why am I here? What was the purpose of this? And so that night he goes home and he goes to sleep, and he remembers. He has this remembrance of why he decided to come. And it's all about the rice. He remembers that before he was born, that was it. The intention for this life was rice. He loved it so much that a life dedicated to rice was going to be meaningful. And after that, the man dies.
Okay. So do you have like maybe an intuition or an idea or a thing that you can say, like, what is God? What is the divine?
I think there are a lot of different ways of understanding this. For me, there is very little humanness in it. I don't find that I can understand this in, yeah, in like the human expressions of saying that we're made in God's image, so God must look like us, or that what is divine is related only to, like, a greater power of what lets us be the intelligent creatures of a planet. Um, for me, like God or source or spirit, divine is, it's an expression. It's an expression of what allows all of this that we call the universe to continue being what it is. It's an intelligence. God is an expression of intelligence that actually allows life to be. I don't need it to be a person or that if it's divine, it's just one thing. I think it all comes from love, and that love is the source of what allows it all to be. Whether in the very, very, very beginning, let's say even before like a type of big bang, it was just loving oneself, loving the essence of self so much that it just explodes into this intergalactic expression of love. And now everything has a point or a place or a purpose, a way of organizing particles, turning things into other things. But it also, for me, it's also trust. It's trust that all of this keeps going because it started so long ago. I feel like what it really is much greater than what the human can comprehend fully. And so words are quite limited to say, what is it? If it's more of a feeling. And I think that's what makes the heart beat and the lungs inhale and exhale, even if consciously we're not aware of them doing that. I think that's a part of what God is. It's this beat that is there, whether we're aware of it or not.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. During the inner dance sessions, why is it that some people move, some don't move, people see things, but some people don't see things? Why does that happen?
On a really basic level, it has to do with ways in which we internalize our experiences. Some people are more visually oriented, so the prefrontal cortex might get really involved in the process and allow for them to see things in more of a very vivid like dream, and and have these more visual interpretations. Other people are more visceral, connected in the somatic parts of their experience, and the parts of the brain related to more kinesthetic movement might be active rather than visual. Sometimes it's both at the same time, and a person is physically acting out what it is that they see behind their eyes. So there are ways that multiple places in our minds can be awake, alive, alert, and active all at the same time. And then there are moments when it moves in waves. So it might be a wave of color and visualization, and a wave of just very deep feeling. And then it might go into something else again. So partly it has to do with parts of our brain that are active, but as well, how are we integrating or synthesizing what it is that's coming through? Is it the thought that comes first? Because as soon as, let's say, for example, a person begins to think, I'm bored, nothing's happening, a lot of the time, everything else just seems to turn off, because the perceptions and abilities to perceive what is subtle are now in the background to this feeling of boredom that's in the foreground. So it gets harder to reconnect with what you've already kind of canceled out because of the thoughts that are most prominent. So things move a lot more in very different ways, and depending, like, how much are you willing to let yourself go into what feels like nothing in order to see if something else is there. And yeah, this might wake up very differently each time. And maybe there are just repetitive ways that a person finds themselves in these inner experiences. I also find that if the body has opened from another type of practice or modality, or uh, or some type of a ceremony in the past, that it's more inclined to use these pathways for opening things when you try something new, because it's familiar and your body already has this type of a memory, whether it's fully grounded in or whether it's just a subtle expression that you're slightly tuning into. Like, it'll just keep intensifying the more that you let it keep going, right? So if somebody first experienced some type of an awakening, let's say through plant medicine, maybe they were using psilocybin, and this was a way to activate more of a expanded state of consciousness connected to what could potentially open up with psychedelics. And this is really well documented at this stage, what ways the brain's pathways and the types of connections that can be made in neuroplasticity through a journey like this. It might be easier for the energy to move in a similar way if somebody comes into the inner dance for the first time. So it's using the openings from whatever whatever you've opened up with before as a way to help you keep going deeper.
So it's not like that if people don't see anything, or they don't move around during the session, that nothing is happening.
Yeah. Not everyone at the end of a session will have the same experiences. So the energy won't move through every person in the exact same way. And it doesn't mean that if someone is sharing about all of these visuals and movements between different worlds, or going back in time and being a Greek goddess or an Egyptian pharaoh, that like the person who's like, I didn't have any of that happen, so did I do it wrong? Yeah, it doesn't mean that one was right and one was wrong, or one was good and one was bad, or
Yeah.
wow, how come I didn't have that? How do I get that? How do I get to have that kind of an inner dance?
Yeah.
Maybe it will open up over time. But again, this is also ways that maybe we knew of ourselves even before we got into this body, and it's taking what we did know already and helping us to just keep remembering more. And if we focus on what someone else is remembering in that moment, then we might block ourselves more from seeing what it is that comes through for us.
Yeah.
Um, but many times when people stay with this work for a long time, they will have these moments of connecting to almost every different facet. It just isn't something you can plan for specifically to say, today I want to experience visuals, and tomorrow I want to, have a full on body shake. No, we can't plan it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you. I remember from our training, there was somebody in our training who was actually doing inner dance by herself at home, just listening and having the process. Now, nowadays, you have a lot of energetic like sessions where they do like transmissions. Can you maybe like talk about like what is it like a transmission, and what is like having your own inner dance session, and why can't you like you can do inner dance almost like very frequently, while with the transmission not so, maybe not so frequently.
And when you speak about transmission, are you referencing other practices or modalities?
Yeah, like energetic practices where they like transmit certain frequency of energy or do some kind of activation.
Okay. In inner dance, we don't speak much about transmissions. And it's because this we see more as a remembrance. It's you connecting back with what has always been there, a way to re empower ourselves to feel what we do embody. And you can't
Mm,
necessarily embody things that aren't already there.
mm.
When things wake up, it's because it was there. And so as you wake up to it, it's the
Yeah,
part of yourself that you just didn't realize. So
yeah.
now that you're aware of it, it wakes up even more. And so the more
Mm,
that this is a wakefulness within you, the more you embody what it was that was always there, but maybe sleeping at some stage and now is a little
yeah,
less sleepy. And in moments like this, the the only thing that feels like is being transmitted is the languaging of, you know, empower yourself, be your own best healer, be your own best doctor, be your own best researcher of who you are, what is wholeness for you, in what way do you find yourself in this state of potential for wholeness to emerge, how do you
mm,
connect back with what you've always known, because you came from what is the all is. If we came from that and now we're in this reality where things feel individual or separate, or as though we have to work really hard for our own life in order to have what we want. Um,
yeah,
how was this never it? It was never this. So, how do we remember what it was? Um, I can't transmit that memory to you. I cannot transmit that. You have to find it in yourself. But what I can do is I can create the conditions in which these types of changes have the potential to happen. So if I'm coming to a space and I'm technically the facilitator,
mm,
or the healer, or the one who seems to have a in-depth understanding and awareness of this, I know that I am witnessing this room that I'm with in a moment of possibility.
Mm,
Within that possibility, a lot of change, transformation, and maybe even miraculous healing can happen. I can't say that
yeah.
it will. I can't force it to happen, but I can create the conditions in which I know this is exactly the type of condition in which these things do happen. So if it were
Mm,
to
mm,
happen, it wouldn't be surprising. If it doesn't happen, that's fine, but I will be here within the conditions so that this way I'm also allowing myself to be in vulnerability and possibility to receive, right?
mm,
So I
mm.
can't transmit and receive at the same time, which means I need to be more receptive. And the more that I can be receptive, the more things actually happen.
Yeah. Huh. um, like this is an off question. Do you ever do like channeling other entities or work with other energy entities, frequencies, those kind of things?
Um, I wouldn't consider the channeling as an entity. I do channel things a lot.
Mm,
A
mm,
lot of times things come through. And there are definitely times when I'm aware that this might be more of like an ancestral
mm,
voice. And
mm,
when I say voice, it's not like I'm hearing your grandma in my head. um, but that it's coming from threads related directly to a person. This doesn't necessarily come through when I'm in a session with people. In the inner dance, if the channeling is coming through, I'm not focused on anything more solid than a vibration or a frequency. I won't label something as entity because that solidifies the energy into a form. If I
mm,
can keep it in the formlessness, things keep passing through and
mm,
moving through, and the channel is open. And I'm not then
mm.
closing it into who or what am I channeling. I'm just letting things move. And that's
Yeah,
more the organic nature of the unified field, is to have everything in unity, so there's no separation. So there can't be an entity. It's all a part of the same field. So when I'm in that space, I don't have anything other than that. There's no separation. And I
yeah.
empty myself as fully as in that moment I can be, to also allow for the emptiness of me to bring through these expressions of unity. And if I'm in the feeling of this expression, I know I'm not in a place to begin labeling or identifying with forms.
Yeah.
So that's not something that usually comes up.
Mm,
I'll feel
mm.
things, yes, but I won't hold tightly to what it is that I feel. I'll work with the energy as it's moving, and then it'll just keep moving.
Okay. Thank you so much. Sometimes when our luck has ended in our life and we feel hopeless, we reach up and we pray. I wonder, do you ever pray? Like, can you say something about prayer, the use of prayer?
Yeah. Oh, I grew up with a lot of prayer. And like both there's gratitude and resistance to how strict my mother was as I was growing up when it came to Christianity, prayer, you know, praying before every meal, praying before leaving the house to go to school in the morning, praying every night before bed, being in the same room with me, my sisters, and my mom, all saying our prayers, and you don't
Mm,
go to sleep until everybody's done. The prayer was a very important part of life in that way, but it did also come, like I said, from a strictness. So the rigidity around the need for it felt also like an aspect of control coming from my mom's own systems of interpretation rather than like the joy of doing it. So I didn't
Mm.
have as much joy in it at times when it felt like I was being required to do it. Um, but I was very open with my prayers as a child. And I also would pray a lot on my own. And when I found myself in states of prayer, more the state of
Mm.
being in that quality of surrender to whatever is higher that I'm praying to, um, often came through in synchronicities, alignments, things that would make me feel so much appreciation and gratitude for my life. A lot of times, prayer now is just gratitude instead of praying for something that I want or externalizing it to, like, please heal me, please take care of me. Sometimes there's that, but a lot of times it's like, just thank you, and prayers of gratitude um, always feel very empowering. Not because in the moment that's what comes up, but because afterwards it's like, wow, it's so simple. Even just a few moments of prayer and gratitude seems to change things. And that change feels so much bigger than just that small moment, right? Like just these tiny little moments turn into much bigger expressions.
Mm. Mm. Can you maybe, I don't know if you have like an intuition or an idea, why do some people have like really strong psyches and some people go into psychosis?
It's not easy for us to ground or
Mm.
find balance, or what will allow us to thrive. Um, this planet is confusing at best for a lot of people.
Mm.
Um, I think those who can really appreciate simplicity don't necessarily find as much psychosis, because there is a grounding in, but it's a grounding into what is simple. And and then the more that we're connected with the earth, I feel like the more we remember how to be simple and how to flow with life in simplicity, which allows a lot more harmony to come through. When our mind is overworked, when we're stressed, when there's mental chaos, when the systems that are expecting us to be a certain way don't match up with the energy of our being, it's hard to know, like, which is right, which is wrong. Do I listen to what my parents say? Do I follow my heart? If I'm only 10 years old, how much am I allowed to follow my heart? How much do I need to take the medicines that they're giving me because they've labeled me with some type of mental illness or disorder? And so now I'm being told that I'm not stable. So will I ever find stability, or will I have to resort to a medicine that tells me this is what's going to make me seem stable, or that this is my state of stability when I'm on this medicine? That's
Yeah.
confusing. And it's confusing when we don't have people or communities or classes in school to help us understand this better. It's as though we got really good at teaching biology when it came to our physical bodies, um, but speak about consciousness and it's a little too abstract. There's no place to find it inside of us. Talk about emotional health as a priority, um, and you're going to get a lot of people eventually taking sick days because they're mentally not well. And how do you get a workforce to continue with the same drive and motivation to succeed or to produce, if you start bringing awareness that maybe if you took a day off when you were really stressed out, you wouldn't actually get physically sick? But if we only ever give people a chance to rest once they're physically ill, how do you ever sort through what got you to that state in the first place? Most of the time, it's because of the buildups of other things that make us feel very physically imbalanced. And when did the psychosis start? You know, if it is physically getting you to a point of feeling ill, did it start when you started overworking? Did it start when you were a child? um, is it that we are in a world of mostly sane people, um, with only a few of us doing insane things? Or is what we believe to be quote unquote normal actually quite insane?
Mm.
Because if what we've been told to keep working towards as the balanced state of normal is actually crazy, less and less people are going to be able to maintain that. And then they'll seem very, very crazy, very insane, very mentally unstable. Yeah. And maybe we're at a time right now when that's a very important type of transition. And those that believe that they have a strong psyche maybe need to question, where is that strength coming from? Is it coming from obedience to the systems that have been mechanically driven in one direction for a long time? Is it in balance if you seem to adapt to the lifestyles of your culture so you fit in well with wherever in the world you were born or where you put yourself? Um, what is that? Yeah. And
Mm.
if it's so strong that it only understands life in one way, is that actually a stable psyche? Maybe, but only in that one small part of the world where you are. Because if you go to another part of the world, that system might derail you completely, because
Yeah.
the way of life in another place is so different. And that system of stable psyche isn't going to help you at all. So
Mm.
we need to find ways of adapting. And I think the more we don't find that we're happy or stable in one thing, it's actually because we're maybe just empathically sensitive to a much greater global thing that we all don't know how to describe fully, or in words, or in a tangible way of connecting just yet. But perhaps that's why so much comes up in psychosis. We don't know how to say for sure that the one way we were taught is the direction to follow.
I wonder if somebody in your family got a psychosis, how would you help them or guide them? Would you put them in a mental institution with the pills and stuff, or would you take another approach?
I have worked with people in many different ways around this. Um, Perhaps at times plant medicines have been involved, or ceremonies to help support um, some of the openings that might come from integrating things differently. In my own family, there is plenty of history of mental instability. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, and most people in my family are actually not that keen on doctors and going what seems to be the modern medical route. Not just for this, but for most things. Yeah. um,
Yeah.
I come from a family where uh, although not everyone might be as extreme as me when it comes to natural remedies, medicines, and approaches, they totally get it in that sense. Yeah. I can't say that they know how to best support these mental instabilities when they come up. So there's been a lot of, toxicity, abuse, traumas in my family. And this isn't just my immediate family, it's across the board. So I've also found in my life that this is a good puzzle. It's a good puzzle to look at, like, how does this happen? Why did that happen? Who is it that came from? Or How did that get passed down? What did somebody choose not to look at in order to just feel like they could survive? And how long can you keep avoiding it before that method towards survival is the exact thing that prevents you from living?
Yeah. Mm. So what made you start Innerdance Trust?
The pandemic. I was in Thailand and grounded, not really able to go anywhere. Everything closed down. Wasn't trying to go back to America. And had been used to traveling around Asia for years and was kind of in between what I had as a home base and what was coming next. So, in a time when I couldn't travel to share this work with others as I usually would do, and there weren't many people in Thailand, I had a place in person that I could facilitate, but I still wanted to share. So I felt like it was a good time to begin building something and finding ways that I could, put something online so people had some access and were able to connect with me even if I couldn't physically go to people's countries yet.
Hmm. What's like the use of facilitated training? Is there like a special activation or something magical that happens that you can then learn to facilitate?
um yeah. uh i I appreciate that the facilitation chorus isn't just for those who want to be facilitators. Sometimes
Hmm.
the thing we're facilitating is ourselves, right? So at at that level, especially, um, the process is for each of us and not necessarily for us to feel like we're going to go and hold a room of 100 people tomorrow and it's going to be amazing. But through every
Yeah.
stage of the journey, how do you facilitate yourself, right? So I think when we look at what comes through in a chorus, there's a lot of unlearning, and maybe that's part of the activation, is that as thoughts, concepts, and studies that perhaps were a part of your education ever since you were small are coming into a deconstruction to allow for the breaking down of the organization of old information so that it can get reorganized and restructured or put into a new form of remembering the same information but differently. This unlearning tends to activate things within us because we are now facilitating ourselves differently because the information is being organized differently. So,
Hmm.
how does that change things, right? As soon as you get into an aha moment or you have this quick insight or this profound realization, things start changing. So, I trust that because I know what I'm speaking about and how that moves and works, and definitely brings up a lot of self inquiry in participants. Um, and and then I trust that as these things start to move in us, as we are perceiving ourselves just a little differently by listening to things that are moving within us, as we're also coming deeper into knowledge, that the experience sessions also support the continuation of the movements within us internally, so we don't have to think about it. So with the inner dance in that way, it's helping us to reorganize without always thinking about how to reorganize.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. Yeah, your course is really amazing. Like honestly, like it's really, and it's like what you said, it's not only about becoming a facilitator, but just like, yeah, it's about life in a way. It's really yeah, I think awesome just to broaden your perspective, and just to see like, yeah, how programmed we are, and how complex but also simple things are. Yeah, it's really, I cannot put into words how awesome the course is.
Thank you.
So what were like maybe like this, I'm curious, did you like in your own inner dance sessions, and I wonder, do you still have your own inner dance sessions for yourself? Did you have like breakthrough moments, or like really like peak experiences? How are those like?
Uh, I feel like the more that people come into this work without needing it as a practice or a modality, it seems
Mm,
to weave as a way of life, or
mm,
as a uh, a type of expression, or a way of expressing life. Yeah. And so if that expression comes from somewhere deep within us and we're aware of it, we don't need to lay down to have that awareness also become a part of the dance. And that can be in any moment. So I do find that that was always there. And that's why it's never felt like I have to set a specific intention to lay down in order to go into an inner dance. And maybe this is one of the most beautiful parts of the whole thing, is just noticing how much the dance is always in motion and at play, um, especially when we're least thinking about it as a practice, when it just gets to
mm,
be present. That leads to a lot of really beautiful insights at times. There are definitely moments when I lay down for an inner dance, either like with participants when I'm doing the online course, or in that few 5 minutes, 3 minutes when I'm in a group session and I get to just let myself lay down. Um, so much of the time, because if I'm laying down and other people are also laying down, um, it's like just tapping into the shared source, the shared consciousness, letting myself really be immersed in it, rather than feeling like I'm facilitating it or that I'm just the observer. I get to fully be the participant. And then
mm.
I feel like all the things that I am already feeling just intensify, especially in
Yeah.
relation to the connection. Yeah. Um,
Mm,
there are definitely times when I have these moments when something's really strong and I might need to still take time and like, okay, I'm gonna have to go sleep for the next few hours just to let my conscious brain turn off to continue processing this, and then I'll see what happens after. Um, and then there are times when I have so much energy that it's like, "Ooh, that was big, so okay, let's just ride this out." But yeah, in in more than 10 years now of doing this work, but also a lifetime of experiencing inner dance before I knew what the practice itself was, um, it's very, very much just a part of life. So
mm,
um, the subtleties, the little things, uh, the things that are so easy to miss. Um, this becomes a part of the greater sensitivities for deep processing and
yeah.
and really great empathy. Um, Empathy that's not just for humans, but for all of life in some way. And I think that is what continues to uh, fill it continues to really fill my journey. Mm.
Mm. Do you think having like a longer course of doing something like an air dance, that it changes you as a person?
I think it always has the potential to do that.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. It changes me every time I do something. So even if I'm the one that's helping to guide things, it still
mm,
changes me. I can't avoid that. There's no way to get around it. It's a
mm,
part of this type of work that change is inevitable because we're working with states of change. So if everything in this work is about the fluctuations, the movements, the transitions, the feeling of intention as it moves within us and finds its way into all these different multidimensionalities, then it's yeah, then it's like it's always there. Yeah.
You know, when you said all that, there's a question that popped up. It's like very often in our lives, we're like at this fork. You have to choose either go right or I go left. Why is it so difficult for us to just go? What?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Choice.
Hmm.
Choice. For me, this is just a natural part of all of it. Um, and I don't know if we would understand what balance, harmony, um, center, or um, refined oscillations in relation to wholeness. I don't think we'd know what any of this is if we didn't have this perception of choice. Yeah.
Hmm.
What if it was that whether you went left or right, you'd still end up in the same place? Would you have as much of a challenge choosing? Yeah.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
often the perception that one is good and one is bad, one is right, one is wrong. Like one will lead you to a better thing than the other. That makes us question what should we choose? Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
If all of it had the same end result, would you question what you were choosing as much? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. It's like you would think that at some age you would just know who you are and it would all just be so obvious, but still it keeps like, because it's like what you said, that word perception. You see, but you also feel or sense or project things that are not actually there, and so your choice is not clear. It's it's really funny, but a part of life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um over the course of this year, like more and more, I've encountered like people over Europe, over the world, that are doing like their own facilitator training. Or also like they hold a space, they do energy work, they play music, and people like have experiences. And it's really popping up all over like the world. And I see like new facilitators, this, and it's so much spreading. Like, do you think like that, like at this point, this is like a global spreading of all these of this energy, of this way of working with people, like this spreading this tool to people to empower themselves?
Mm. I think there are still going to be a few contradictions within this evolving, growing type of spirituality.
Mm,
But I do also feel like the underlying root is this drive towards a shared state of consciousness. And we don't know exactly what that is yet because we haven't gotten there. But the more that part of each of us is feeling the pull or the drive or the intention that came from something greater than my life or your life or any of our own individual senses of intention, that maybe this is like the prayers of our great grandchildren. Yeah,
mm,
that aren't even born yet, that are praying. In order to be here, you all have to find something new. I can't be here until you find that. So we
mm,
pray for you to be that so that we can exist. Yeah. whatever
Yeah.
it is, it's not a linear, it's not a linear thing, and nor couldn't fit into linear perceptions of time. But how this moves is also part of what evolves. Yeah. And while we are seeing a lot of this emerging, we're also seeing a lot of other things emerging at this time. The types of artificial intelligence that's growing, still, we might say like, okay, a lot of people are moving towards this, but there's also through the pandemic so many people that moved towards life is social media. Like there's nothing outside of social media, like everything about life is that, and it even maybe is sustained because of it. So there are a lot of different things that people have found their way into in recent years that's so different from what it used to be. And that's great. Yeah, like it's giving us a chance to explore facets of ourselves in ways that we maybe never thought we had permission for. I also feel that the less of a stronghold religion has on people in nations where religion has been fading for some time or for several generations, there isn't any less feeling of spirit. Yeah,
Mm.
there's just not as much motivation towards religion to explain it. So we're finding different ways of tapping into that exact same source that we've appreciated in the foundations of religion for thousands of years. But perhaps religion just isn't cutting it. And we can't use that as a complete justification of how life exists. So we're just tuning into different ways of writing our own books instead of all reading the same one.
Yeah. Hmm. Um, are there like people or things in your life throughout your life, or tools or whatever, or anything that has passed you by and really like radically had an impact on you and really changed your life?
Say that one more time. Tools or
Yeah, tools or any, is there anything like throughout your life that just passed your life and it like radically changed something in you? Yeah.
mm. Uh, One thing that's been there since the beginning that's never changed. But I'm so grateful for the like consistency of it is
Mm,
nature. And nature is a tool. And I think nature is the most simple tool. But wow, it's so invigorating to be in nature and feel how deep the connections run when I just get to be a part of something so much um, more magical than often what humans create the world to be. I find more magic in nature than I do in anything else in life. I feel like when we come into a state of inner dance, we are tapping into the magic of nature in the nature, the like authentic nature of humanness rather than the human conditions of being alive. Yeah.
mm,
So
mm,
that's just such a basic thing that I can't live without. Even in the years I lived in Asia, I was a lot closer to nature in many ways, like in an eco village or on a tropical island or in places where there aren't so many people. And now I'm back in the U.S., but it was really hard not to um, buy a lot of seeds or small plants so that I could care for life because it was really important for me to still have a lot of life around me, even if I'm not around a lot of humans. So
yeah.
to grow a garden has been really important. It's been such a big part of me landing back in the US after 10 years in Asia.
Mm,
This is a drive in life, is just nurturing life in some way or another, in every way or another. And I just I find that I keep going back to that. How do I nurture life so that even if I don't have a family of my own right now, or I'm not constantly like nurturing humans at the moment, just nurturing plants. It's
Yeah.
very grounding for me. So this is a tool for me, is just connect with nature. In terms of like practices that are also tools, I've learned a lot over the years through yoga and various forms of yoga. Definitely in some of the healing modalities of yogic practices. Meditation definitely has helped, and and then outside of inner dance, I've also gone into family constellations, and I really appreciate that tool for a lot of the ancestral work, and understanding some of the threads of energetic charge that run through our veins or
Yeah.
are somehow embedded into the cellular structures of our
Yeah.
DNA, and that's been really valuable for me.
Mm-hmm. There's this new method. It's called reconstructive. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's also a bit like constellations, but it's active, and it's without words. It's really like a bodily felt experience. So, but it works with like constellations with certain themes, and like I would really recommend it to you. I've done a facilitator training a couple of months ago, and it's really like, whoa, holy shit. Like you're really like actively yeah, feeling in your body the energy, and you're living it out. It's without perception, so it's very freeing, but it's also very deep and very intense, and you do it as a group. So there are 4 people at the same time working together in motion. So it's very active, it's very intense. If you're ever around, like, I would love to share it with you. And yeah, thank you. It's really, yeah. um how do you like decide to devote your life to be a facilitator? Is it like a calling?
Um, for me, the service to spirit has been there since I was a child. And
Mm,
I had my chat with God back when maybe I was 8 years old or something. And yeah, in those prayers or in those conversations, I was very aware that life doesn't exist without service. So it just started from a very early age, and it's not changed. And even if I've found myself in other jobs or positions, then it's fine. You can do jobs and you can work, or you can, dedicate your time and energy in many different things. Um, but that I wouldn't consider being a facilitator. This is more just knowing. It's a knowingness and a being, and more than anything, it's about being what you know, and um, and just sharing what it is you're being. If that seems valuable to others or something that others resonate with, they'll come. Yeah. But again, I don't consider myself a facilitator.
mm,
I understand that I have a lot of wisdom and knowledge and experience, and that this can be very helpful for others. Um, and I can offer a lot of tips and suggestions or ideas on
mm,
what has worked for me, or based on so many different moments when these are the type of profound things you just don't forget. And having journeyed with inner dance in more than 10 countries around the world and helping open up communities in different parts of the world, and experiencing this with remote villages and very far off places and in the middle of huge urban cities, um, it's it's not me doing it. Yeah. And
mm, mm,
it's it's not possible for one human to do it in that way. It's when I let go of me being something and me facilitating anything that so much more of it actually happens. But again, then this is how I know that this is embodied, and this is a part of what is service to that higher source, greater energy, spirit, God, whatever it might be, that is in motion through me, and that's just what life is. And I understand
Yeah.
it that way. So
Yeah.
it does keep moving.
Yeah.
Sometimes for sure, I need to put some effort in on any personal things I might be doing. That's for the sharing. That's to continue allowing for people to also feel empowered by what lives, exists, and is alive inside of them in that
Mm.
exact same way. They might not remember it quite the same way I do, but when you feel it for yourself and you know it, this is mine. Yeah. Um, it often does bring us into the heart, which wants to be of service in some way or another.
Mm. I recently did a Innerdance facilitation, and a friend of mine, he also like co-facilitated. He didn't do the training, but like I let him do Innerdance on me, and it was flowing with him. There was just a flow. And when he was doing it and he was seeing me, he had like these thoughts, certain thoughts. And he afterwards he told me, it's like I really want like practical like guidance. What thing notions or things with my hands do I need to do? Like, aren't I supposed to not have any impure thoughts? Like I still have impure thoughts and these kind of contradictory thoughts, but I'm in this role. And he's like, I don't feel like I can do this because I'm still not perfect.
Yeah. It
Mm,
happens. It happens to especially Western people that have really strong perceptions of right and wrong, good and bad. One way is yes, the other way is no. And I find that this came up really strong last night. Actually, was this idea of the it's like it's not definitely not good, but it's not bad. It's eh. Um, how can eh actually be the magic?
mm,
Hmm? They're not different. They're not separate. It's actually through that movement as you're going through eh, that allows the magic to happen. It's only if you resist it that you don't get the magic. But if you can see that even that part where like um you don't know it, um the not knowing it but then letting yourself go through it opens up all that magic. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So when we feel like there's impurity, I'm not fully aligned, my thoughts are all over the place, um letting yourself actually be that will give you the magic. Then the magic will happen. it, it
mm,
it's the it's the letting go of any resistance towards being in that confusion that also minimizes the confusion over time or maybe in an instant. Yeah. But if we continue to try and analyze it or understand it cognitively, it takes away from just being in the moment.
mm, mm. Um, is there like something or someone who you look up to or who inspires you?
I don't have any one person in particular. Um, and I don't have someone I can say as a role model. And this is funny because I think ever since I was a kid, that question gets asked in school, over time, like every few years, they're like, who inspires you? Who's your role model? Maybe you have to write about that at some point too. And so as a little kid, you're like, my mom is my role model. And then you're really like, she's not, but I don't know what else to say because I only know like 3 people in my life, my mom, my dad, and my sister, right? So how
Mhm.
do how do we figure this out? I struggled with this ever since I was young, wondering, is there something wrong with me that I don't have someone that I look up to, or I don't have this person that inspires me so much that I want to do things just like them. Um, so I think I let it go in relation to like why don't I have that? I think it's actually because
Mhm.
I don't know that I resonate fully with um any one human experience as that which would be a role model for me. So things in what I look up to has been maybe attributes of how people live their life,
Mm.
but that's not a singularity. I wouldn't have one person as like the example because I also feel like that might idolize or put someone on a pedestal, and I really truly live as much as possible what is equality. And so I also feel like that's why I don't have somebody up here that I look up to in that sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That like I can look at them, I can appreciate the energy moving through them. So those that have just worked really really hard or focused so much that every day this focus is their meditation of life, it is their lifestyle, and it is then their way of receiving back from the world because they put so much energy and dedication to this um, practice, whatever it might be. Maybe it's making art or music or research or um, being a philanthropist or dedicating service to those in need. Maybe it is being the role model of a simple life and not needing so much. These things are valuable for me. And so I feel like more than any one person, I feel like there are, after living in so many different places and meeting so many people from around the world, parts of the essence that I feel in someone's heart or in the heart of a culture that inspires me. What's at the root of a culture? These things, these can be super inspirational for me. So, for example, meeting a grandmother in South Korea who was well versed in mythology and roots of language and stories of Korea from very, very long time ago. And she was explaining to me the roots of the words and the symbols connected to some of the words. And just to hear her speaking about it with such passion and a way of embodying the creative symbolic expressions of these words as she was speaking them, I felt like I was reading and reading a book through the way she was speaking. That just took me to the heart of Korean people and community and this high context way of living, and that was really inspiring. So I
Mm.
wouldn't see the way like one successful businessman from Korea has lived his life, and how he's taken this essence and used it to motivate him. I wouldn't see the same in an American either, and whatever drives someone towards their human success.
Mm.
But I do feel I've learned this over the years. So um yeah, I can't put that to one person. More it's what do I feel at the heart of a people that inspires
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful. It made me think of something my friend said recently. It was like, I see people sometimes and they work, they just live about their life, they go from job, from position to position. They're really into that. Like, is there something wrong with our brains? Why are we like seeking for, something in spirituality and like seeking these experiences and, trying to, why don't we just like, is there something wrong with our brains?
Yeah. Um, mm. I do feel like this is also part of the reason why I continue to um, put so much energy, time, and heart into things like inner dance and sharing. Um, it takes us out of that day to day work mentality or being another cog in the wheel and shifts some of these mechanical functionings of the modern day human into a a much greater field of response rather than action.
Mm, mm, mm. Um, so if you look at your life right now, mm, throughout your life, you have like different phases you go through. Are you like aware of where in your process you are? What kind of stage of development you're at?
I'm very aware that moving back to the US was the beginning of a new chapter. Um,
Mm,
I'm still less than a year into that chapter. And
yeah.
so I'm also aware of the transitions that I go through, things coming in waves or just hitting new stages of realization around what is old, what is new, where are things moving, in what way am I a direct player in that, in what ways am I still just the observer, um,
Mm,
how much action can happen within the beingness rather than the doingness, um, and uh, yeah, what is also still being sorted through to feel even more embodied within this, hmm, I don't know, within this overall experience or in at least just within this moment. Yeah, I'm very aware that I'm in transition right now.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. For me, like last year, I became aware like, oh, this is the end of me trying to satisfy my desires, like all these different desires, unfulfilled desires, making up for what I didn't have and trying to fulfill that or overcompensate. And I was like, okay, now it's like a phase to be of service. And so it's like learning and embodying, and it's so slow, but also so fast. But like it's sometimes it seems so slow, and sometimes it's like, oh, this is too fast. Waves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Because some processes are like really like a whirlwind. They just like absorb you and then they spit you out, and you're like, what? Where? And some processes are like really like they take you by the hand, and it's like it's very safe, it's very easy, and you're like, okay, I can do this. Bye bye.
Mm.
Um, what do you think that with inner dance, what's like the most important thing that it has like revealed to you or shown you or yeah, for you?
It's shown me that it's safe to be close with other humans.
Hmm,
Mm.
that's beautiful.
That's a huge one for me. And yeah, I feel like every time I'm in a space with other people and connecting either remotely or in person, um, there's something so big and most of the time really beautiful that comes through. It's like I get to see parts of myself that I didn't know existed unless I were to see that part of myself through the eyes of someone else. And although they might not be talking about me at all, they're talking about themselves. This is how we become very, very wise of who we truly are when there's no separation. So I'm not listening to someone talking about their own story. I'm listening to someone speaking about how the universe moves. They might be speaking about that through their own personal stories, but this is the movements of a universe. So it helps me understand more about my own universe and my movements within
Mm.
it. And also gives me a lot of trust that it's safe to have these interactions and we don't
Mm.
have to be so guarded or so structured around what we speak, that a lot of times when things sound like they're not going to make any sense, they make so much more sense. And that's where the vulnerability really comes through. So
Mm.
again, this is what helps me feel safe, is that I'm in a space where people are vulnerable, and
Yeah.
there's so much beauty in that.
Yeah. Holy cow. I remember the first time that I went like to like these kind of sessions where you're really together and everybody's under a solo process, but you're still all together in it. And it's so mesmerizing and so romantic. It's not personal, but it feels like, wow, I found my people.
Mm.
Like, yeah, like we can really be here together and just be and show and express and so and be vulnerable and it's okay. And it's very rarely that in like ordinary life cycles or situations you have spaces where you can do that. Otherwise it has to be like therapy or it has like some kind of, you know, very serious or like, oh, you've got some issues so you're here, you have to share, you know, like a certain kind of setting where already you are some kind of person, while here you just, hey, you're just like a person who's here to have like some meditation or you just we want to listen to some music, but it just the way people and you open up, it's really, yeah, beautiful. It's, yeah. Yeah, it's so easy to fall in love with. I this last year I had like the pull and or the urge, like, yeah, you know what, I because I felt so disconnected from my community here because I don't really vibe with the values and the rhythms and the intensity of everything that's happening here. So I have like this pool, like, okay, I want to go to this a hub, spiritual hub somewhere in the world where there's like a community of spiritual minded people, where there's different atmosphere, different intensity, different values. I wonder, when you as a Westerner first went to there, how was that? Can you share something about that experience transitioning to then and then incorporating and integrating that experience and coming back?
That reintegration is still a process.
Yeah.
Definitely. I
Mm.
don't feel so grounded in America just yet. And I feel like I'm taking my time, letting things unfold organically so that I am not either shocked by what I find if I go out too soon, or that it's effort in a way that feels like more needs to be in the output the in order for like the sonar or the echo to return. Yeah. So I'm very aware of these types of internal movements and
Mm.
building up that kind of call and response system where what signal goes out has enough energy for a return. Yeah. So this is important for me. Um, and I'm not 100% there yet. So that maybe in another year or two, I would be able to answer differently.
Yeah.
What I gained from being in community though, was different depending on where I was. I can't say that 10 years in Asia represented just one thing. Yeah. And so my life in Malaysia was very different than when I lived in the Philippines or when I lived in Thailand and was based mostly in Koh Phangan. I'd say that Koh Phangan was the largest form of a spiritual community in one place as compared, or, yeah, like as compared to anywhere else, except for maybe Bali and all those that were based in Ubud. But Ubud would be like a little bit older than Koh Phangan. Some of that energy would have started from those that in early days went to Goa as a starting point for spirituality in the East with a lot of foreigners and not necessarily those that were dedicated to an ashram or
Mm.
to a monastery, let's say.
Yeah.
So there are places where people have been going as seekers or perhaps as teachers, but a lot of times people go to the East because they're seeking something within themselves and they're
Yeah.
not really sure what it is or how to find it or in what way this journey is going to bring healing. But the idea or the intention is, let me just get on this quest first and then see what I find. Hopefully, I'll find myself along the way. Um, I never had that in going to Asia. I went to Malaysia to teach at a learning center. So I still had a quite Western job or, relationship with Asia in the beginning. And over time, I got introduced to people in different places and different communities and got to be established with the Global Eco Village Network in the Oceania Asia region. So I got to experience quite a few different communities focused on eco village living. But even in the eco village network, which is global, Asia is quite different because a lot of what is happening at what we would call a level of eco consciousness is still embedded in the traditional cultures around many countries in Asia. So there's tons of eco village stuff happening, but they wouldn't consider themselves an eco village. They're like, this is just our village. This is what we've been doing for
Mm.
thousands of years, and it just hasn't changed much. So that type of consciousness, I think, is helpful for people that don't get it because they're like, how are you doing what you're doing? And how have you been doing this for so long? And how is this not new for you? And you just seem to have had this way of sustaining life for those that don't have much or in places where the land doesn't offer many resources and you make it possible. You seem to be thriving in places where it just doesn't seem likely for this to happen. Um, and you're just doing it with so little. So, this I think is what also helps humble people that come from the West and are seeking things and to see what it's like in a place like Asia, especially to be so close to the earth or to have so little, but also to have so much happiness and love when materialism isn't the main focus for happiness. Yeah. Um, so I learned a lot in moments like that. I would say that in a place like Koh Phangan, there's still this sense that anyone can be the facilitator of something and just make it up, whatever you want to facilitate. And you'll probably get a few people that come if you put it on Facebook, make an event, book a venue. So there's still this like superstore shopping market of what you want. Just throw it in your cart, get a taster of this, get a taster of that, sample this and sample that, and then decide what you're going to go home with. Um, or what new recipes you learn that you might want to try cooking at home when you get back to your own country, kind of thing. I
Mm.
think there's a lot of that in Asia and in places like Bali or Koh Phangan, it's common. And I don't gravitate to things like that. So this isn't ever my understanding. Um, but I can appreciate how deep the conversations have been with people in places like this. how open-minded people are as compared to those that maybe never leave their country or never leave their state or just stay in their small village their whole life. I can appreciate how the realizations that come through for someone who, let's say, is um, the who's the recipient of, let's say, racism or some type of minority mentality from the country they're born in. Like in America, this is very strong, right? There's a lot of tension between races and economic status. When a person who's used to this type of suppression or oppression in America maybe goes to a place like Bali, where so many people from all over the world are there at the same time, no one's looking at the color of your skin or the accent that you have or making you feel out of place in some way, like you're going to steal something, or you need to be watched, or you're probably going to do something illegal, right? um that is liberating. That's so liberating. That's so
Mm.
beautiful. You get a chance to experience yourself as a human inside of the the multi-dimensionality of humanness, that no matter who you are or where you're from, we have something common in our hearts. Yeah. So I love communities for this nature, that we're intentionally connecting with the heart at some level that we might not experience in a society that's driven by materialism or by, like, the need to succeed in business or in corporations, things like that. You don't find a lot of spiritual corporations in places like this. Yeah, you find
Mm.
more communities that are organized around the garden or a spiritual practice or a part of being simple with life and the way of um, just appreciating more while perhaps doing less.
Yeah. Huh. I wonder, because of you being exposed to that kind of living and now integrating it, if after the integration is complete, if you will like gonna have like create your own community or your own, like, I don't know, center or space where it's always like a mini of that, but here, a mini version of what's there, but here.
It's possible at some point that might
Yeah.
happen.
Or better said, what's internalized in you, but then
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah. I could see something like that in the future. I also might still just travel, so that this way I can be in different places and just let things land in spaces that already exist rather than trying to
Mm.
sustain my own space.
Mm.
But I also have an intention to dive deeper into some of the research and just kind of grounding things in with the science and um, like maybe um, a more physiological approach to the science and this work, to also support those that might feel that they're almost stuck in the way of um, mm, the way of spiritual communities. If everybody in a spiritual community can create a workshop and you don't really need anything other than your own personal experience to have that, or let's say even with this work, when someone goes and changes the name or starts to build their own thing out of it, there's nothing wrong with this. Yeah. But for anyone in this work that might feel like they're just stuck in the spirituality, yeah, like it's still seen as mystical or a little taboo in some way. What would support the continuation of this work from a more evidence-based approach? So I'm
Mm.
interested in that, especially right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So in the near future, if I can also ground some things in that way. Maybe
Yeah.
instead of having a center that's just designed for people to lay
Mm,
down and enjoy, it's
mm.
more clinical.
Yeah, yeah. Like, do you know Dr. Joe Dispenza?
Uh-huh.
Like what he does and the way he's also like scientifically like measuring everything, and like quite amazing to see it, like how it's evolved over the years. And I mean the results that people have, like with the events and the things that they do, it's wow.
Mm, yeah.
What's like the most important thing you learned in your life?
Mm, never have answers. Never try to have all the answers.
Mhm.
I think that's important. Sit with the
Okay.
questions. Be okay with
Mhm.
questions.
Yeah.
Never try to have
Mm.
all the answers. I think that, yes.
Okay. So if you could contact the 20-year-old Serena, what would you tell her to maybe do differently or not do differently?
I think I would just tell her, trust it. You are definitely on the path, even when you don't feel like you're on it.
Hmm.
Yeah. There was something very
So,
strong coming through for me at 20, very deeply related to everything that it is now. And I knew it. I just wasn't fully able to be in it at that time. There were still other
mm,
things that had to happen in order for it to line up. But the thing I felt that was aligned even back then hasn't changed. It's just the frustrations in daily life that still make it feel like maybe it's not right yet.
yeah.
But it was really good. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, so you don't think there are mistakes in life?
Um, I would say that there are times when we have the ability to throw ourselves off course in massive ways, or that
Mm,
other events that happen in our life throw us off course in massive
mhm,
ways. I don't think those are mistakes.
mm. Why not?
It's especially through the challenges that we understand what true strength is. And often we think that what we perceive as a shadow is the negative attributes of ourself. But if what we're doing in our daily life is negative self talk, like, I'm not that good at this, or, oh, I should have done that better, or, come on, like, just get your act together, these aren't shadows. These are being played out. Yeah. So, what's actually in the shadow is the part that would be saying something nice. Mm.
Mm,
If
mm,
what I'm saying out loud to myself in my head is, oh, I'm so frustrated right now, like I'm not getting anything done, I really should have had that finished. The shadow is the part of me that says, just be patient, like take it a little bit slower. Don't be so hard on yourself. And
mm.
because I am so focused on maybe the judgments, right? I'm not aware that the shadow is actually really positive. So, what is a
Okay.
mistake? Because often the
Mm,
mistake is actually just the perception that there's something negative in the shadows.
mhm, mm. Yeah. Do you have like regrets about past events? I mean, I don't know if you killed anybody or anything, but I mean like healthy regrets, you know?
I haven't killed anybody,
Okay.
not at least as far as I know. Um, uh, people have gone through many an energetic death in my presence, but usually there's
Mm,
rebirth as well. So,
mm,
um, No, I feel like ever since I was small, I tried to understand, what does regret mean? What does it mean to have it? What would it look like if it was in me? Do I have it in me? Where is it showing up if I do have it? And I don't know, even in some of the most difficult and challenging things in my life, I'm not sure I have regret. Um, I don't know that there's something I could regret. Maybe it's
Mm.
because I haven't gotten so far into a derailment that I feel like I've regretted my choices, but I also feel like as soon as regret turns into a learning potential,
Mm. Mhm.
um, it completely changes everything. So as long as I continue to feel that life is a learning, and I'm just always in this like energy of wanting to learn more about myself, more about my experiences, more about how I can remember like what it's like to be rather than to do. I feel the less I could regret anything, because it means everything that's happened definitely happened for a reason.
Nice. Checkmate. Uh, how can people love more?
I mean, it's easy to say something like, connect with your heart, drop into the heart, just give yourself space to feel more than to think.
Mm.
But how do people love more? Remember that love is infinite, and in the same way that most all energy had a starting point way before we were ever here, love also has that. And it's so big that you can't feel the full extent of what it is, even if you got so close to being like, wow, this is what love is. There's always something more that love becomes when we connect with it with each other. And we can't ever know what that is unless we connect with it with each other. And so, how to love more? First, definitely, like, what does it feel like to love yourself? And not just saying, ooh, like, you need more self-love. just love yourself. That's it's so easy for people to gaslight when they talk about it that way, and to play it off as though this is just so simple. And then, yet,
Mm.
how many people might start to speak about it that way and show up as a person who really isn't loving themselves? Be
Mm.
honest with yourself, be compassionate with yourself, be patient with yourself.
Mm.
And especially with this, it'll start to grow. And when you have it, you feel it, it's there. And there's not a sadness that something's lacking. You know it, you can feel it. You can be sad, but there's still something that's just kind of making things tick, rather than you trying to understand what makes it tick. Know that love is a part of what is actually allowing for it to tick in the first place. I feel like that helps us to connect with how universal love is, and how multidimensional it is. That if we're also always curious about love, where you can never know it completely, I think you keep getting closer and closer and closer the more you feel it or look at it or speak about it. It brings things into the unification more and more. Um, and I think that also helps it to grow. So energy continues to build around that which it's gravitated towards.
Mm. So, Serena, with all your traveling and all your experiences and all your reference points, all your knowledge, what do you think? Monogamy or polygamy?
So does it have to be one or the other?
Like one partner or multiple partners?
um, I think this is a very personal question that each
Mm.
person needs to answer for themselves, if that's a question they want to ask for themselves. Maybe for some
Mm.
people, the question doesn't really exist, so it's not an important thing to focus on. Maybe
Mm.
some people have inside of them innately more of
Yeah.
a monogamous energy or a polygamous energy. It doesn't mean that in the 3D they wouldn't have both the polygamous innate energy and a lifelong partner. Yeah, that could still exist. um, what plays out in the 3D isn't necessarily the same as what is our innate energy. Yeah. Maybe if we were to minimize the connotations associated with either or in relation to saying monogamous or polygamous, we would feel a bit more free to express love openly with everyone.
Mm.
And that if it isn't tied to sexuality as a part of the experience, polygamy is our nature to love everyone equally,
Mm.
unconditionally, and with the fullness of our heart so that we can be open and
Yeah.
trusting. There's something very authentic about being in a state of love that is able to be free. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that like polygamy is always free to love. There are many conditions and conditionalities associated with deciding one or the other. In the same way that if someone says, I give my heart to you, does it mean that I close my heart off to everyone else? Because that also doesn't really feel authentic. So
Mm.
I can't relate is I can't relate specifically to the question, but I do feel that love is meant to be shared. And that it doesn't mean we share it in the same way with every single human in our life. But if we're
Mm.
talking about what makes the shift between loving and intimacy, that one's personal. That one is like, decide what feels right for you. And
Yeah.
if it feels right for you to be in an intimate expression of love with more than one person, um, you know, see how that fits or doesn't, and
Mm.
then adjust so that you also feel like you are giving yourself permission to live in a way that's meaningful for you to experience love to its fullest in this life.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah. It's when you're like working with energy and you're like around people who also work with energy, and your experience when you hug people or you're around people is like a bit more, I don't want to say richer, but you feel more, you're more sensitive. So like if there is like some spark or connection between people, it's very like, so it's like qualitatively or something, you notice it. And then it's like it's almost like also impersonal. It's just like these energies together, they have like this reaction together when they're together. And it's like either you go and allow that to have the chemical reaction and go further and create the mixture, the concoction over there, or you hold back with reason. No, I'm not like this. No, I'm not gonna put myself in this situation. You understand what I mean?
Mm. Uh, I think I've found the greatest breakthroughs and
Mm.
authentic states of empathic connection
Mm.
when it isn't one or the other. Yeah. There's a way in which we are conscious of the trance like quality of being swept up in an energy and just letting it take over. Um, there's a part in us when we are conscious that will still hold aspects of reasoning to what feels good or safe in our own intentions, with
Mm.
whatever boundaries aren't there to wall us off or close us off or protect us from something we're defensive about, but that the boundaries are there to allow for open expressions, um, also without another energy perhaps taking over that makes us actually feel like we're consumed by the energy.
Mm.
But often people like to be consumed by energy because it's intoxicating and it has almost the same sort of feel as being drunk or high. So why not just let yourself be swept away by this and enter in it so fully that all the inhibitions are just gone? But
Mm.
does that create the same kind of thing as like a one night stand the day after and you're like, oops, like tiptoe out of here or something, right? Maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I drank a lot last night. However things like this come, it is a shift in energy, and it is something for us to be aware of in relation to what does it mean to be responsibly participating in an energetic movement. Do I have to hold back in order to be responsible? Can I be fully engaged without getting swept away? Where are my boundaries? And what are my
Mm.
boundaries personally in relation to my own experiences? Do I feel like I'm actually stable in them, or that I don't really have any? And maybe if I
Mm.
don't have any, that's something for me to learn. Or perhaps not
Mm.
having any is actually what also lets so much of this openness come through in some way.
Mm.
And I think that's different every time. It's not always the same in the way that it comes through. Sometimes it's really incredible just to witness what it feels like to be in this rush at the same time as noticing that, like, okay, like here's a chemical reaction.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. You know, I think a couple of days or so, I there was somebody, and we hugged, and the moment we hugged, we stayed in that hug for super long, and then at a certain point, like stories started to come, like certain like judgments or ideas. But then I was like just staying in my heart. And then, when you're in that hug and the energy just stays there, like rocking back and forth, there's a dance. And it's like, it's so, in a way, magical, wonderful, because like if you just stay with the body, it's like the bodies talk to each other in a certain, like, yeah, not verbal way, like non-verbal way. And like the bodies, it's like, it's so beautiful to experience. And then as it progresses, the mind keeps like popping up and like, oh, should I kiss her? No, like these kind of things. But then you just go again to the heart, you stay to the heart and not say anything, not even like I love this or I love you or whatever. But then at a certain point, like if you just stay in that body intelligence or that sense of being, just allowing the body to carry, it's so wonderful how then the lips just find each other. You kiss, you don't kiss. You kiss, you don't kiss. And it's like this, this contraction expansion, and like boom, and then it goes like that, and it goes like that. I'm like, I'm not saying do this with everybody or something, but it's like to experience that even like once, it just shows you like, whoa, there's real beauty and magic to just being and not being in a story, like, because you don't have those kind of interactions very often in your life.
Mm.
It's usually about, let's get somewhere, let's get to a goal, let's get into bed, let's get to an orgasm, or let's do something, or it's always like you're going somewhere. But here it was just like being in that, and you don't know what's going to happen. It's okay not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like we can maybe take uh, a lot of learning from the era of the 60s in America, but the movement spread. Yeah. It's like so many places around the world had their hippie movement, or this
Mm.
peace and love, and this openness to feel into the expressions rather than having an end result. It was a counterculture, but it's embedded in us now that, yeah, this way of being in flow, the peace and love, the love child, the flower child, that part of like, what was it that was driving them to just get together and and be happy, right? And happiness comes in all different shapes and sizes and forms. And sometimes it's very creative, sometimes it's sensual, other times perhaps there's sexuality to it because that's a part of our humanness.
Mm.
And it's not always easy for people to just let go or be free in that way. So, however things do emerge, just, you know, noticing for ourselves, like, where is the energy in me coming from when it does emerge?
Mm.
Maybe these are, coming up because I'm still working through parts of relationship with another person,
Mm.
or between a man and
Mm.
a woman, or a man and a man, however it is, that there
Yeah.
are things that we've been taught to suppress. And it's not so easy to just say peace and love and freedom for the expressions of love. Yeah. So I'm grateful for the counterculture of the hippie movement to also somewhere be in the back of our consciousness as something that's possible. It is possible. Don't always have to focus on the orgasm, right?
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
also just enjoy the elements of love that are there in the subtleties or the other types of expression when we just let ourselves be.
Yeah. Hmm. What in your intuition or feeling is like a successful relationship? How does that look like?
For me, it relates a lot to equality. Yeah. I think when I can be and witness by someone as their equal, while me knowing that intentionally it's within my integrity to hold others as equals, that um, it creates a potential for a lot of alchemy. Yeah. How do we meet each other where we're at without judgment, without skepticism or criticism, um, without needing perfection? How do we just meet someone, flaws and all,
Mm.
noticing how, like, whatever it is in the 3D might still be striving towards what the higher self is? Um, but that it's okay. we're,
Yeah.
we're not going to merge with higher self until this part ends. So, you know, while we're here, all these little bits might just keep coming through. Um, Feeling for what it is in myself that is the trigger, whatever might be a discomfort for me, is also because this is a part of my process. Otherwise, if it's not in my process, someone's not going to make me feel uncomfortable, right? It's not them, it's me. It's a part in me that's like still feeling vulnerable to someone else's energy. How do I bring that into balance? Because that's the equality, right? Is like meeting each other in a place where I'm not judging you, you're not judging me, and I'm not taking advantage of you, and you're not taking advantage of me.
Mm.
I'm not taking for granted this encounter, and neither are you. And so
Mm.
we're able to find this middle place to also build off of what is already in harmony, rather than trying to like settle each other's differences or make someone change to be more like what the other person wants.
Yeah. Like, what do you think is like the purpose of a relationship besides procreation?
Um, well, would I would have to say that in relationship, it's how we get to like know ourselves. If if we're in solitude all the time, you do also get to know yourself, but not necessarily through the lens of everyone else. Relationships are our um they're our mirrors. Yeah. Like we understand more of who we are by engaging with others, or by engaging with the things that we're not. so that we see more and more who we are. We learn about what it is that makes us tick, makes us feel alive, makes us feel love, makes us feel sadness or pain or pleasure and joy. It's all connected in relationship. If you're just by yourself all the time, like, no pets, no humans, like, yeah, you can learn a lot from nature. You can learn a lot, but you're never going to get quite the same trigger as you would if you interacted with another human, or quite the same feedback as you get when someone shocks you with the way that they see who you are, or the way they describe what you're going through, or offer support when you didn't even know they could see this. There are many different ways that we only really get this chance to feel what that connection means, if we actually enter it, right? So it's our choice. It's a choosing. It's a conscious choice to be in an interaction. That's relationship. Yeah. You don't get to just be your isolated self. As soon as you agree to be in relationship, you agree to whatever the energy is that is between you and that person. You can't just be your own individual self. You have to accept and appreciate what is coming into the space with you. Otherwise, it's not a relationship. So whether it be romantic, platonic, familial, or otherwise, they're all connected in this way.
Somebody told me like some days ago or some while ago, like, Igor, you're really good at technically surrendering. Like, you're really good at that. But like, is that the same thing as real surrender and real freedom?
Mm. Mm. I can understand what they might be saying. Some of the thoughts in your head still hold a lot of dichotomy or polarity. So, in that sense, because I think the questions come out in that way, I do wonder if it is actual and or if it's still just theoretical. But at some point, even when we ask all these questions, um, things ground in, and we wouldn't know how you wouldn't know how it would ground in unless you ask those questions. So, in a part of getting there, we have to question, how is it, right?
So, what is the easiest, quickest way to find your path in life?
uh, so distracted right now. I don't know. um, I don't know. How do you find?
That's relationship for you.
I think, yeah, right. Uh, Stop seeking your path. How do you find it? Stop seeking it.
So, do you mean by that exhaust yourself with the seeking until you're like, like, I'm tired of it, I cannot do it anymore? Or consciously, like, even though I feel like I want to seek, there is an impulse in me to seek, I'm consciously going to choose not to seek.
If you're always in an energy of needing to find something, you'll always be in the energy of needing to find something. The desire is the energy to find something rather than being satisfied with what you find. Yeah. And so, in this, when there's a drive to find your path, that will always be the drive that you don't know your path. So you have to find it. Sometimes people will get to a point and realize, oh, this is it. This is it. I found it. Like, I'm here. And now I'm reconnected with this, or that fragmented part is now back in, the wholeness. And maybe people find that without seeking at all. They find it by just engaging in something they love and then realizing, yes, this is it. Yeah. If the object of desire is desire itself, then the object of the path is irrelevant to the energy of seeking or trying to find. Yeah. The desire comes from the energy of trying to find or having this rush of sensation when you feel like you're seeking, right?
Yeah.
It's like this mystery that comes up in the seeking that's intoxicating or contagious. It's that which you cling on to. I want this energy. I want to feel that I'm seeking. Yeah. But again, if that's the focus, you won't actually find it. So how do you find your path? Stop looking for it. Start living it.
Do you think there's like reincarnation and like so for instance that everybody can get like eventually enlightened and stuff?
I think we're all enlightened. We just forgot that.
Hmm. Hmm. But everybody can get enlightened.
Everybody can
Embodied, I mean.
everybody can remember the embodiment of enlightenment and empower
Yeah.
themselves to live it out. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
What does it mean to be in light? I know the word technically is spelled enlightenment, but what does it mean
Mm.
to be enlightened? It means to be in light. How do you remember that? How do you remember what it is to be light? Yeah, find yourself in moments when you know yourself to be that.
Mm.
And then let yourself die a little bit every day so you can return to that light again more and more. Yeah.
You know, in my inner dance journey, there was a moment. This is the last thing. There's a moment. Thank you so much for staying on so long.
Mm.
Thank you. So you're really wonderful. There was a moment where I was going to energetic sessions, and I was having like these visuals, like these strong visuals about this woman, and like having like very strong emotions, and it was so strong. It was like I was having like a law of attraction meditation, like with the visuals and feeling and see. So afterwards, I had like these impulses that really pulled me toward that. Like, I need to go there. This is like my future. This is my path. And I really didn't know like how do I like what do I do with this? It was so new for me. Like, and I remember I was telling you this. Do you remember what you told me?
Mm, we spoke quite a bit about it. I don't remember
Yeah.
which part
You
of what I
you
said
were
you were
you were
thinking about.
telling me about how when orange opens up, there's material that comes up. Remember that part?
Mm-hmm.
And that you don't necessarily have to, it doesn't mean that it has to manifest like in 3D, that you just have to allow that to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it was like I was having all these impulses and I really didn't know what to do with them. And I tried to communicate it and stuff. And it's only when I said it to you, you're like, oh, we've seen this before with people during immersives or retreats, that they have like these connections that they become aware of. Um, and just that you said that and you explained it so calmly and normally, it really like, it's like, okay, this is like normal thing. It's not like a big thing that I need to do something. This is like, because it was so strong, it's like, okay, like, okay. And then I remember during an inner dance session, there was just like one moment where there was just like I fell into the heart space, and then from the heart space everything like just like cleared up and everything became like calm again. I was like, okay, it was all stories playing out with the material that was presenting itself.
Mm. Mm.
And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Energetically, we hold a lot of shame in the sacral. And so when things come up that might have been unsorted in relation to relationships, or the emotions that are spinning and churning and waking up in the sacral, especially in a session like Innerdance where things are moving, right? Um, it's really easy for things to come up in the sacral. And sometimes it's hard to know what to do with shame when it's there, because it feels like it's a thought, or that it's easier to think it through, or do I do this, do I not do this, like, do I act on my feelings, do I just feel them? It's a lot harder for us sometimes to just sit with, like, it's okay to feel this. You don't have to be ashamed of what you're feeling. It also doesn't mean you have to act on what you feel, but are you okay to feel it and not feel ashamed that you have it?
Hmm. Yeah. It's nice to be able to have somebody and actually talk about it, because yeah, there was nobody that I could really like talk to it in this kind of way. Like, you bring it down,
Mm,
because usually like in the energetic sessions, like they say like, oh, everything that happens during a session, it's not that real important. Focus on what's happening outside of the session when you go home, the changes and stuff. But like certain things, it's like I don't want to say imprint, but it's like they have such a strong like drop, or such a strong like woof, the way they come, that's, yeah, it just stays for a while.
mm, yeah.
Hmm.
I would never tell anyone to only focus on what comes up when they go home. That almost seems to then bypass what was coming up during the session. And if it came up during the session, definitely there's going to be something to work on when you go home, but not because it's separate, it's because it's connected. um, and you can't separate the session from afterwards necessarily.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're going to lock things into just this container of, um, in the US, we have this saying like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it does not work like that in energy sessions. No, it doesn't. You can't say what happens in the session stays in the session. It's not like that at all. Then
Hmm.
exactly like why people say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas is because so many things are opening up. You don't want to remember them all, or you don't want to associate yourself with yourself when you were in that moment, right? It's like, no, that never happened. If you do that in energy work, you're just going to suppress everything that was trying to be seen, heard, expressed, released, or um, just given voice in some moment. Um, a lot of times these
Hmm.
things come up because we are ready for another form of reintegration after seeing it differently through a session. But if you just try to say, nope, that happened in the session, it's not relevant. Yeah. Yeah, that'll come back at some point.
Yeah. Hmm. You know, I was like with some people who like who work like a formal job, and I was like talking with them, and it's like it's really easy to connect with people, because you sense them, like after the white noise talk, you can really like, it's pretty easy to connect with people, because everybody wants to be heard, everybody wants to be seen. So it's like, oh, it's not so bad like being in the system, but it just like the way the system is, there's like, I guess for me, there's almost like there's some kind of judgment, or some kind of like almost like disgust with it, like I don't want to live in that or be like that. I don't know whether that's like something from the gut or anything, or it's something unconscious. I wonder, when you're back now and you're like, you see the cog and the system, do you have like any kind of reactions?
In previous visits to the US, when I was still living in Asia and would just come back for a short time and maybe travel around the country with Innerdance or visit family, or, both in one visit, I saw how the things that were still sensitive in my system as a trigger for what that system was and what I no longer represented or what was different in me. Definitely, I felt things much stronger. But then I also would notice those things. So each time I would come back, I would also be curious, like, what's still there? What's still there? What has changed? The things that I found hardest in coming back, not this time, but the last time when I was visiting in 2019, was just how easy it was to, like, swipe your card for everything, or all of the self checkouts at the grocery store, or
Mm.
and not knowing how to do it, and then messing up all the time and being like, oh my god, I don't know the system. But you that's overwhelming if you don't know it and everyone's doing it and they're looking at you like, what's wrong with you? How come you don't know how to do this? And it's like, we don't have this on a small island.
Uh,
So yeah, things like that I think got to me more than anything. But it's been okay. Like, since being here, I'm not in the cog, or I'm not a cog in the wheel. I'm here. I'm obviously contributing to something about America, giving my money to small businesses or Amazon or whatever it is, like how
mm,
things just kind of go. But I actually feel so much more stable within myself. It doesn't really feel like I'm engaging in the same world anymore, even if I'm here. I'm really appreciating that, and I'm appreciating what it feels like to have autonomy, even if the system itself is quite oppressive.
yeah. Okay. As I'm really curious about one thing. So it's a last question, and then I think we've gone pretty long. So so thank you for holding or being here with me. So if you close your eyes right now, right, and you put your focus and your attention on your heart center, and you really sink as deep as you can into it, and when you're really as deep as you can be in the heart center, can you from this space tell me who you are?
From this space, there is no name. No, it's more the
Hmm.
what. Yeah, I don't have words. I know what it feels like. It's definitely not a who. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but I don't have words that would be able to really describe what it is. What am I?
Hmm.
Hmm. Hmm. No, it's beyond words. Huh?
Hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I want to thank you so much for yeah, like honestly, like the way you talked, the way you shared, it's so amazing. Like I can literally just do snippets after each questions of just you answering the questions and have that like YouTube videos. It's like such an amazing speaker. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it was enjoyable. Um, yeah, it was good. Thank you. I appreciate being asked to sit down and do something like this. You're welcome to edit this however you want. So yeah,
Yeah,
feel free to play around with it or make
yeah,
small videos or long ones or however it works. Yeah.
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 Thank you.
Yeah. I'm gonna
You can
I'm gonna stop the recording. We can
yeah,
still chat for a minute, but I'll just stop
yeah.
that.